Hello once again, and welcome to another edition of the SaskAgToday.com Roundtable. I'm joined by the Chief Agricultural Editor for SaskAgToday.com, Kevin Hursh, and the AgriNews Director for 620 CKRM Regina, Ryan Young. I'm your host, GX94 Yorkton Agriculture Director, Doug Falconer. It was a short week this week, gentlemen, only 4 days here in Canada anyway. I guess there was some trading on some markets in the United States on Monday. But I think the first thing to talk about was the big news on Tuesday when Ottawa stepped in on the port lockouts in both Montreal and Vancouver. Wouldn't you say that was pretty big news, Kevin?
Yeah, that's great news that it's putting those work stoppages to an end and sending it to binding arbitration. It's interesting that this government has found a different way to do that without actually having to go through the parliamentary process. And I know that's still the subject of some litigation as to whether that stands up or not, but they have the ability and have shown it now a couple of times to step into these disputes when they're not settled and get them back to work in reasonably short order. The trouble is that even when it's only a few days of actual stoppage, when you mess up the system like that, you lose a lot more time than just those actual days of the work stoppage. So there's a lot of weeks been lost in the trading cycle this year due to work stoppages.
Ryan, your thoughts on it?
I think it's also a good thing, agreeing with Kevin's thoughts there, especially with the fact that the ports, I believe in BC especially, they've been without a contract for more than a year now, and negotiations in general across the board in Montreal as well have been going on for quite some time. So the fact that they haven't been able to get a deal done in good faith over the last several months is kind of an indicator that either one side or the other or both have been dragging their feet on this and brought it to this point to try to get some leverage. So for the feds to kind of step in now appears to be good timing. Obviously, the Liberal government believing in letting the two sides negotiate first and then stepping in to order them back to work as a last resort. And that seems to be the case here.
Another big event this week, Kevin, was Harvest Grain put out an announcement. Looks like they're going to be a little bit of a bigger player in Saskatchewan.
Yes, they already had the Bornhorst Seeds facility at St. Gregor, which is primarily a canary seed processor, and they had half of the facility at Fillmore, Saskatchewan, which has a variety of specialty crops. But they now purchased the facility at Zeelandia, Saskatchewan, just east of Rosetown, that previously was owned by Global Food and Ingredients, and they went into receivership, and they had received the facility previously from Canpulse Food. So now Harvest Grain will have all three of those facilities led by veteran grain trader David Nobbs. So the specialty crop market has been difficult. A lot of facilities we've seen have come up and have run into trouble, and the Canadian Grain Commission has been involved. The next interesting news in this whole file will be Purely Canada, and the Canadian Grain Commission is still working on the claims for Purely Canada, and we'll also find out how many of those claims were ineligible because producers missed the timeline. So it'll be interesting when that announcement comes out. Some are expecting those claim numbers to be very large.
Speaking of claims, the Canadian Crop Hail Association put out their numbers for 2024, and you delved into that, Kevin.
Yeah, $230 million in hail insurance payouts. And when you look back at loss ratios of recent years, some have been higher, some have been lower. Sometimes there's actually more money paid out than they collect in premiums. This year, although the numbers aren't all final, they expect that $230 million will represent 64 or 65% of what they collected in premiums. Now, you have to realize that I'm not sure where the break even is, but I would suspect maybe 85%. Anything higher than 85%, they're probably losing money. because they have to pay for all of their administration and their reinsurance and various things like that. So, but a fairly high level of claims this year, and what made claims unusual this year was they started out very slow, unusually slow for claims in the early part of the growing season, but many late season claims into the latter part of August and through September. Very many claims that pushed up the total and contributed to that $230 million payout on a total liability for the companies of $10 billion, which that's a mind-boggling amount.
So you don't think any of the crop hail insurance companies are in trouble then, if you're suggesting they probably have to be over 85 to 90% payout for them to be in trouble?
Well, they can certainly run losses, but they all have to have their insurance covered, either internally or by reinsurance. So we've never, in my experience, I've never seen a case where an insurance company went out of business and people were left unpaid for insurance claims. We seem to have a system in place where that doesn't happen in Canada.
Well, that's good to hear. And another subject we wanted to touch on was the fact that the Saskatchewan NDP unveiled their shadow cabinet this week. And Ryan, you were right on top of it when you suggested Carla Beck would be the shadow minister for agriculture.
Well, to my knowledge anyway, it seems like I was the only one to correctly predict that. In fact, one of our colleagues sent me an email earlier in the week saying, point for you. So that's kind of reassuring to hear. But it comes as no surprise. NDP leader Carla Beck, she appointed herself as the critic for agriculture and rural affairs, as well as intergovernmental affairs and executive council. Now, this isn't the first time that a party leader, whether that's a premier or opposition leader, have doubled up on roles. Grant Devine, for example, he was the agriculture minister when he was premier as well, about, let's say, 35, 40 years ago. So there is precedent there. And I could imagine there's some other examples you two gentlemen can recall because you're much older than I am. But that's one notable thing in the shadow cabinet. The other thing is she has a deputy ag critic in Trent Wotherspoon backing her up. So this is kind of all in an effort to try and connect to rural Saskatchewan and try to make inroads there, as it's been quite a long time since we've seen any NDP representative in a rural area. You would have to go back more than 20 years for that. So we'll see where that goes in terms of reestablishing those relationships and to earn the trust of farmers in rural Saskatchewan.
Of course, Trent Wotherspoon, as you mentioned, deputy shadow minister, but he's also a shadow minister responsible for the Saskatchewan Crop Insurance Corporation. So I thought I'd throw that in. And so, Kevin, what's your reaction to the news that Carla Beck will be the shadow minister for agriculture?
I think it's very symbolic. She's got as good a credentials as anyone having a rural background. And certainly, as Brian pointed out, the NDP really needs to make some inroads in rural Saskatchewan. So what better way to do it than to have the party leader also as the shadow minister of agriculture, the critic for agriculture. So I think a smart move on the part of the NDP. Interesting to see how well they actually it actually works out for them, and whether or not they can strike a chord in rural Saskatchewan.
We also heard this week in Vancouver, Immigration Minister Mark Miller was speaking there, and he suggested that the days of temporary foreign workers working for next to nothing are over in Canada. What do you think of that statement?
I find that a little bit off the mark. Temporary foreign workers, there's a lot of rules around the housing that they have to be provided with, the wages that they have to be paid, and their airfare paid back and forth to their homeland. And they are more than glad to come and earn money. And as I understand it, companies that are using temporary foreign workers have to advertise for Canadian help first and prove that they don't have Canadian people willing to do some of this, in many cases, backbreaking labor. So I think there's definitely a place for temporary foreign workers and seasonal workers. I think it's just a case of getting the mix and getting the rules right. But I don't think that it'd be a difficult economy to run, especially in the high labor parts of agricultural needs without temporary foreign workers.
Now moving on to canola and wheat prices, we saw some big swings, especially late this week. On Thursday, we saw canola drop rather dramatically, but it bounced back on Friday. Ryan, you had a chance to speak with Adam Pacalo on oil seeds and grains.
That's right. And kind of going back before I get into my conversation with Adam Bacallo there, I've noticed with the price of canola at the Moose Jaw Viterra grain terminal, for example, it's taken a lot of big swings both up and down. I think it was on Thursday as well. It went down like some $21 or something like that. And it closed right around close to the 590 mark, if I remember that well. I could be off by a few dollars here and there, so don't take it as gospel. But nonetheless, there's been quite a few swings, like you say, Doug. Speaking with Picallo there, he said it was down overall this week. So as well as with the December Minneapolis wheat contract, that was also down considerably, and we're going to be heading into the March contract for December, or Minneapolis wheat rather, going into the March contract as well. So not really something to kind of look forward to in the near future here. But in terms of any factors whatsoever, palm oil prices you mentioned, they were kind of increasing, so kind of helping out canola a little bit, kind of making that price for canola steady. And you could see that in the short term remaining steady as vegetable oil prices are kind of correcting due to some lower production concerns. So we'll see where that goes moving forward. And as for wheat, not really a whole bunch of external factors from what, to his knowledge anyway, just more of a on the technical side of things, just looking to see if that contract will move down to a further price below the floor levels. So we'll see where that goes.
Your thoughts on the prices, Kevin?
One of the factors in the marketplace when you read the analysis is people basically wondering how everything is going to play out after the January 20th inauguration of President Trump. And people wondering and worry and don't like that sort of uncertainty. And that's one of the reasons cited for slackening grain prices, fears of a trade war with China and various other factors. And in the larger monetary marketplace, the value of the Canadian dollar has dropped to multi-year lows and may have more drops to do as the American greenback strengthens. That typically improves our prices, but it certainly didn't prevail against the winds of change this week. Canola did not have a very good week price-wise.
And finally, we wanted to talk once again about Bill C-282. Of course, that's that private member's bill that would protect the supply management system from future free trade negotiations. I think we talked about it last week that there was an amendment made and it's going back to the Senate to be reviewed again. Ryan, you had a chance to catch up with a couple of gentlemen regarding their reaction to that news.
I spoke with the president of the Agricultural Producers Association of Saskatchewan, Ian Boxall, and the executive director of the Canadian Agri-Food Trade Alliance, Michael Harvey, about the latest development. And I'll start with Michael Harvey first. He's been following it very closely since the beginning. And he explained, as far as procedures is concerned, the committee made the amendment and passed it or approved it, but that doesn't mean it's official, as it has to go back to the Senate and for all senators to look at it, debate it, and then vote on it. And if it does pass by that point, it gets passed back to the House of Commons for further debate. But the downside to that is, since it's not a government bill, but a private member's bill, it goes to the bottom of the order paper or the priority list in the business of the day. So even if that happens, it could take a long time before that bill is revisited by MPs in the House of Commons should it get to that point. And he said while they would prefer the bill to be rejected altogether, having this amendment reduces the risk of having that disadvantage when it comes to trade negotiations, and we wouldn't have to worry about that with existing ones like CUSMA, for example. And for Ian Boxall, he's pleased with that as well. It's another agricultural group that was against this bill, simply saying it's bad trade policy. And I also asked him about the fact that the ag community was kind of split on the bill. There were some groups that were for it, some against it, and he wasn't bothered by it at all. He said it's all part of the process that we have here in this country as a democratic country, and appreciates the feedback on both sides.
Kevin, your reaction?
The best thing we could see happen is the bill die on the order paper. It's just, as Ryan alluded, bad trade policy in the eyes of most groups. Now, the supply managed sector would have a very different opinion on that, but anybody in the export-oriented ag side sees it as bad trade policy. So in my view, it would be great to see that bill just die on the order paper entirely. However, the amendments that are being made at least remove some of the initial problems with the bill. So as Ryan says, we'll have to see how the Senate and how potentially the House of Commons treats it.
On that note, that's going to do it for this week's edition of the SaskAgToday.com Roundtable. On behalf of 620 CKRM Regina AgriNews Director Ryan Young and the Chief Agricultural Editor for SaskAgToday.com Kevin Hursh, I'm GX94 Yorkton Agriculture Director Doug Falconer saying so long until next time.